This is the beginning of segment 3, and I'm going to talk about an ethical framework for clinical research using ethical principles. This framework was put together first about 20 years ago, and it has 8 principles. They are, as you see on the slide, collaborative partnership, valuable scientific question, valid scientific methodology, fair subject selection, favorable risk-benefit evaluation, independent review, informed consent, and respect for enrolled subjects. And the way we think about this framework, which has proven to be quite useful for evaluating and even proposing research, is that it's sequential. You start at the top. So I'm going to talk about each of these, both what it means and what some of the challenges are. So collaborative partnership basically means that ethical clinical research should be a collaborative partnership with the relevant parties. And that includes collaboration in planning, conducting, overseeing research, and integrating research into the results of research, into the health system. Collaborative partnership entails respect for the contributions of the various partners and collaboration with existing systems of healthcare. If we go back to the purpose of clinical research to develop useful knowledge, then this is important because the people who will use the knowledge are often collaborators in the generation of knowledge. So these could include policymakers and health systems, community advisory boards and communities themselves, patient advocates that often participate on scientific advisory boards or IRBs, advocates for research funding, collaborating investigators, practicing clinicians, participants themselves. And there are many examples of each of these in terms of collaborative partnership in research. There are various ways that this can be done, and these are just some pictures. This is an advisory group to the NIH. These are, graphics of groups working together to plan research and to plan the conduct of research and to make sure that the details of a particular project make sense for the given context. There are several challenges to the process of collaborative partnership. One is identifying who the appropriate partners are. When is it appropriate to include the community or the participants themselves? It seems like it's always appropriate to include collaborating investigators and health systems to the extent that the knowledge will need to be incorporated into the health system. There are also interesting questions about methods of engagement. People worry about, for example, things like tokenism. If you bring in participants to be part of a discussion about a study, are you really engaging them in a meaningful way and allowing them to have a voice that's heard in the development of a research program or research project? So methods of engagement, how the engagement occurs, is critically important, and there's not one method that's used. The second principle is valuable question. And basically, it's based on the idea that ethical clinical research should answer a valuable question, one that will generate new knowledge or understanding about health or illness, and one that can be used socially, clinically, or scientifically. This goes back to the idea that we are asking people to be part of a research study in order to generate knowledge that might be useful for the society or future patients and not necessarily for themselves. So there's a strong ethical requirement to make sure that the question is worth asking. That's what this is about. It will help us, a valuable question has social value by promoting benefits of society, minimizing exploitation, justifying asking individuals to accept risk or burden, and responsibly using resources to do research. Several challenges to figuring out the social value of a particular study. What is the value of answering the specific research question that's being proposed in any given project? What will we learn? How useful will it be? How will value be judged? And there's a ton of literature debating these issues in the ethics literature. And to whom will the knowledge be valuable? Who are the beneficiaries of the knowledge that's going to be generated? Do the participants have a chance of benefiting? Is it the community, people with similar condition, general society, science, sponsors? lots of questions to propose to try to figure out the social value of a given study. The third principle is valid scientific methodology. And this basically says you've got partners in place, you've got a question that's worth asking. Now the research should be designed in a way that is methodologically rigorous and will yield interpretable knowledge or data. And it's possible to do it, or feasible. So that's what this principle is all about. And it's an interesting one because people often think about valid scientific methodology and say, that's science, that's not ethics. But in so many ways, they're inextricable. You cannot have a good ethical project unless it's scientifically valid and worth doing. And so they're just not separable in that regard. So what does scientific validity entail? Well, it entails a whole bunch of things, and these are just examples on this slide. The choice of endpoints. What's the choice of endpoints in a given study? These are scientifically driven, but they also have certain values attached to them. Whether the choice of design is critical, whether or not to have an RCT, whether or not to blind it. You see this funny, not so funny cartoon about control groups and out of control groups. Whether to design it as, if it is an RCT, as a non-inferiority or a superiority study. What the primary outcome is. Whether it's an interventional study, a natural history study, a qualitative interview study. These are all important questions in terms of the design. Scientifically driven, but with lots of values attached. Figuring out the choice of procedures. How do you measure the outcome? How long will you follow up the participants? And certainly the statistical methods are critical to making sure that data is valid and interpretable and generalizable. Then there's also this really interesting question about feasibility. If there's a question that somebody wants to ask, that's an important question, there's a design that could get you an answer to the question, but there's no way that it could be done, either because of resources or people that will volunteer or the size of the study or something like that. Then the question is, should it even be done? It needs to be redesigned in order to be ethical. I already showed you that cartoon. There are a couple of others about placebo groups and statistical conundrums that are important to scientific validity. There are some really interesting new challenges in terms of new trial designs that are important but different from RCTs the way we have historically thought about them. Decentralized trials, the kind of trial that is being done was accelerated during COVID because of people not being able to visit sites. These are trials where the participants are in a number of remote sites from where the investigator and the clinical research team is. Pragmatic trials, which are generally the comparison of two often already approved interventions, or sometimes interventions that are not like drugs, for example, comparing what healthcare providers wash their hands with in two different groups can be a pragmatic trial. Platform trials are something that is becoming more and more popular, and I think we haven't thought enough about some of the ethics of these different kinds of trials. Platform trials, again, became popular during COVID in the following sense. You can get a platform where you test 2, 3, 4 different interventions and have one placebo group to compare them to. It's an efficient way to be able to bring in and out different interventions for testing. But it raises a whole bunch of new questions that we haven't dealt with that well. And there's a huge amount of research that basically is the secondary analysis of data or secondary analysis of specimens or biospecimens, or using biospecimens or data for future questions. And these raise different kinds of ethical questions that need to be addressed.